Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to this month's INF Jam on how to open up and deeply connect as an INFJ. So welcome, and as usual, we invite you to say hello in the chat box and let us know where you're tuning in from. So as you can tell, I'm in different surroundings than usual. I am in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. And Marco, where are you tuning in from?
I'm tuning in from my old location from Serbia in a small city called Zrenjanin, but not for long.
Yeah, when do you come to Canada, Marco?
Beginning of March 1st. This is when I will be calling you from Calgary for the beginning.
Very soon. So everybody congratulate Marco, because if you've been following us for a while, you'll know that this is one of his dreams to relocate to Canada. So he's going to be moving to Canada March 1st. Yay! Congratulations.
Thanks, Michaela.
You're welcome. And I can see now that people are starting to say hello in the chat box. So hello, Tamita, Azim. Hi, Brian, Amy. And we have INFJs tuning in from Denver, California, Tampa, Texas, London. So it's always exciting to connect with INFJs from all over. All right, so as you're saying hello in the chat box and letting us know where you're from, I'll just introduce myself and Marco. So I'm Michaela Chung, author of The Irresistible Introvert and creator of introvertspring.com. And I'm also the creator of the Introvert Spring private INFJ forum, which Marco helps me run. So Marco Kurkansky is a INFJ writer and coach. And say hi, Marco.
Hey, everyone. It's always a pleasure to be here with you. And thanks, Michaela, for a lovely announcement. So looking forward to this one.
Yes. So as always, we encourage lots of interaction in the chat box, but please do keep your comments kind and relevant to the INF Jam. Also, if you have questions, you can mark your question as a question by ticking the circle next to the comment. So if you look at the comments, you can see there's a kind of a gray circle. So if you press that, then that will mark your question as a question, and that will be easier. That will make it easier for us to find your questions later on when we do the Q&A. So before we dive into today's jam on how to open up and connect deeply, I would love to know what made you decide to join this particular jam. So you can let us know in the chat box if it was because you feel like you have trouble just opening up and being yourself around people. Is it because you're afraid of rejection? Is it because you love to connect with other INFJs and you just love these jams? Please do let us know in the chat box. And this will also help us know what to focus on and to try and address all of your concerns during the jam. So during this INF Jam, you're going to discover how to shed your fear of being your authentic self, because we know that that can be difficult when you have a rare personality, and to develop deep connections. So you'll learn what's the right time to open up and connect deeply. You'll also discover how to safely get close to people without the fear of rejection, overcome the fear of intimacy and being your authentic self. And of course, you'll be connecting with INFJs and one INFP from around the world through the chat box. All righty, so to start off, Marco, why do you think it's so hard for INFJs to open up and be vulnerable with people?
Yeah, thanks, Michaela, for asking that. Yeah, this is a difficult one for INFJs because we thrive on having deep connections. So like all introvert personality types, we love our solitude, but it is while establishing that close understanding with someone, this is when our true nature comes into surface. However, the problem is we don't open up as much to people as much as we want to. Most of us were hurt in the past for getting so close to someone only to be rejected. So when we try to approach, we would again be rejected. So we are afraid to open up and break that wall that we have. So we close ourselves and we just kind of hope that someone will break this wall for us and that we built and get in, but without hurting us.
And so what would you say is the first step to opening up as an INFJ and connecting deeply? Actually, before you do that, I'm going to read some of the answers because I see them rolling in to why people joined the this INF Jam. So Cynthia says, fear of being my authentic self. Demita says, I want connection, but high rates of rejection and bad experience. Brenda wanted to connect with other INFJs. Megan really wanted to connect with other INFJs as well. And Azim says, I have been struggling with accepting myself. I often find myself adapting to others a lot easier. Generally, I seek to understand before seeking to be understood. Yes, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. INFJs often understanding and rarely feeling understood. Excellent. Talking about feeling rejected, that sense of rejection. So we'll definitely address that during the jam. Okay.
Yeah, so like Michaela
Marco,
said,
what is the first step to opening up as an INFJ?
well, the first step is choosing the right time. Now, this is a tricky one for INFJs, and before I continue, please let me know in the comment section, can you see Michaela properly? Because from my end, it's frozen. Her video feed is frozen. So let me know if you can see her properly before I start. So anyway, the first step is choosing the right time. Now, for all INFJs, it's pretty much the fact that we notice everything. It's kind of like a starting advantage. Okay. It's something that
I think I need to move.
Okay, we can. Yeah, they can see you, Michaela, but you're being frozen from time to time.
I'm going to turn off my camera while I'm just going to move to a different, maybe the internet connection. So I'll be back.
Okay. And while Michaela returns, I'm going to continue with the first step. Like I said, choosing the right time. And we INFJs have the starting advantage of noticing everything. So by saying this, I mean that we notice all those subtle clues and signs, which include body language, just a subtle head nod, and of course the complexity of our sentences. Now, when I say this complexity, I mean like a hidden sign. We as INFJs, when you hear from someone saying to you, I'm fine, or I'm okay, and you know this person well, of course not everything is fine. Of course not everything is okay. And this is something that I was addressing in one of my articles. And this is the fact that we can read between the lines. So we know by somehow a default when it's the right time to open up just by reading someone else's sentence. So we immediately know something is not right, something is not good. So when you hear somebody saying, I'm fine, I'm okay, this is usually the first time. But however, if you don't know the person well and you want to connect deeply with that person for the first time, you got to pay attention to those first initial signs. But just like I said, a subtle head nod or the tonality of a person's voice can also determine a lot. But here's a trick here, and this is something that I always emphasize, because we plan everything, people. We are planners, we are organizers. We plan every single stuff. We plan even months in advance, years in advance, but you cannot plan when you're going to open up to someone. You simply cannot do that. You cannot say to yourself, hey, I'm going to open up to this person tomorrow or in the next day or next week. You cannot do that because you're only adding additional anxiety to your already overwhelmed mind. So allow your emotions here to take control. I know this is tricky to say even for me because we don't know the middle ground. We are all completely in or not at all. So when we let our emotions take over, there's bound to be some trouble in our mind, of course, but that's not the case here, because when you allow your emotions to take control here, when you want to open up to someone, this is when your honesty will go out. I'm going to give you a straightforward example. My best friend, we communicate on a basis where if me or she says it's okay, I know that something is not right, because not just because I know her, but because, like I said, we read between the lines. So it's basically a starting advantage that we have. So you cannot plan stuff like this. You must allow it to take you over, unless you will feel anxious about it, because this is a huge deal for us INFJs. This is really huge. And okay, we got Michaela back. Yeah, I can see you.
Yes. So you guys can just let us know in the chat box if it gets choppy again, or if either of us freezes. But you can continue on, Marco.
Yeah, I was just saying about that. Opening up and knowing the right time to open up cannot be planned. It cannot be planned in advance, and you must allow emotions to take over here. And this is what I was just telling to all INFJs. And I also share the fact that there are also hidden signs through sentences like "I'm fine," "I'm okay," because we can read between the lines. And also, just like I mentioned, pay attention to the person's subtle signs. Body language and movement of the head, even a small tilt can reveal a lot to INFJs, because, like I said, we notice everything. And also, not to forget the complexity of our sentences, how we say our sentences, and how passionate we say them. This also can determine a lot when it's right time to open up and connect deeply with someone, whether you know this person or not. That doesn't make a huge difference, because you already chose, I'm going to open up at that very moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said, Marco. And to add to that, to go along with reading between the lines, oftentimes when you're interacting with someone, there are rejections in the conversation. So I'm not talking about obvious rejections like get away from me, but little rejections that actually tell you, is this something I should talk more about, or is this something that the person does not want to talk about? So sometimes people will give you subtle rejections when you talk about a subject that's just like boring to them, or it's too personal for them. For example, sometimes when people probe me about my work, I'm not in the mood to talk about my work, and I will send them signs of rejection, like very short answers, or I'll just be kind of like my body language will close off, or I'll just kind of like give a humdrum kind of basic answer. And so this is a mini rejection, and it's frustrating when people don't pick up on those rejections. And I'm sure you've been on both ends. And so just be aware. You've probably already kind of noticed them, but take it as a sign that, okay, this isn't the route to go to connect deeply, but there's probably another direction that we can go. So it doesn't mean give up, but if you keep pushing, then that's when the bigger rejections happen, and that's when the painful stuff happens. So little rejections are not a big deal if you pay attention to them. All right, so on to step number 2, which is to focus on action instead of outcomes. So what does this mean for you, Marco?
For me, this represents the fact that our personality type is always focused on the outcome, instead of the action itself. Because even if the action is done well, we will continue to say to ourselves, okay, but I can do more, and I can do even more than this. So the problem that we are getting here when we focus on the outcome is, just like you said, we're not ready for the rejection, because in our mind, we are already at the finishing line. So if we get a rejection, it will cause overthinking, anxiety, and asking ourselves, where did we do wrong? So what you need to remember here is that you need to accept that the outcome might not be what you want from the very start. So focusing only on the action itself, you're already giving it your best shot. So when you say this to yourself, that you're accepting that the outcome might be different than you imagine it, this is like an anxiety release system. This is something that I also apply, because I'm a goal-oriented person. So I'm teaching myself to focus on the action, not just on the result, because the result may vary. It may be and may not be what you wanted. So the key is that you can control what you can do. You can control your own actions and how to safely get close to someone. Because in our case, in the case of the INFJ personality, we always follow a certain plan. We always plan for something, but the thing is, you gotta allow yourself some space for unpredictable events. You gotta allow a little bit of space for the unpredicting thing to happen, because if you don't, you will be disappointed in the end. Just like Michaela said, small rejection, that's okay, we all get it, but big rejections are a result if you already have that goal in your head even before the action started. But to reach that goal, you have to be willing to take the risk of being completely honest and willing to be vulnerable. And that's always a risk, especially for us. I mean, I'm the first one that will not open up easily. There is always a risk of opening up because of our past, because of our previous events. But you need to ask yourself, what's the worst that can happen here? There is no worst case scenario in this situation. There really isn't. I mean, the worst case that you can get is a no. So you're not being physically hurt. Okay, you will be a little bit hurt from within, but that's it. There is no worst case scenario. So you can only receive a no, but you know that you gave it your best shot. And I can tell you right now, every single no is much better than what if. You at least tried, you gave it your best shot, you tried to safely get close to that person, you didn't fear rejection as much, because focusing on action is what we're talking about here, not the result itself.
Mm-hmm. So going back to the whole rejection thing, I want to say that, I mean, obviously rejection is part of life. It's the sad thing about being an adult. Hate to admit it, but I do feel like rejection can become a pattern, a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I see this a lot with, especially when it comes to dating. Dating's always a good example because it's very clear, you know, you really want something and this is what's standing in your way. So that's why I often use it as an example, but it applies to friendships too. So oftentimes I see people who come to me for dating coaching or part of my dating courses. They will choose people that, you know, they see all the warning signs. They pretty much know ahead of time that this person is going to reject them. All the red flags are there. It's, you know, they know. Deep down, they know. And I think that it's just that they're just stuck in this pattern and they're not listening to the signs. And it's like they're just in this never-ending cycle of rejection. So, you know, be aware if that's something that might be happening to you, that maybe all this rejection isn't necessary. Maybe you've gotten so used to pursuing people or accepting people who were already going to reject you no matter what, because that's the type of people that they are. And it's about opening up your mind to the idea that maybe there's something different. Maybe there are people out there who naturally just gel with you and who will accept you for who you are. I guarantee there are people like that. And it's just a matter of letting go of those other people and focusing on the other possibilities. And so going back to focusing on outcomes, one practice that I apply, you know, almost every day. Well, when I'm doing it, I do it every day. When I'm not doing it, I don't do it at all. But right now I'm doing this practice almost every day. And so in the morning, I'll write down the answer to 3 questions. And those questions are, what do I want? Why do I want it? And how will it feel? And, you know, you can get obviously specific in a number of ways. So it could be to do with work. What do I want in work right now? Like, what goals do I want to achieve with work? And then why? Why is it so important to me that I achieve X, Y, Z? Why does it matter? And how will it feel? So being able to step into the feeling of what you want guarantees that you're going to attract that feeling, even if you don't get it in the way you thought you were going to get it. You might think, oh, if I just make an extra $1,000 a month, I'm going to feel this way. I'm going to feel like peaceful and stress-free. But maybe it's not the extra money that's going to make you feel that way, but you focusing on the feeling is going to attract whatever it is. Maybe it's a new exercise routine or a new place to live or a new job that's going to make you feel that way. So when it comes to actually opening up and connecting deeply, here's why these 3 questions are important. Because they keep you aligned and focused on your bigger why instead of the outcome of every single interaction. So when you become focused on all the little outcomes, you lose sight of your bigger goal and your bigger reason why. And you also start to lose motivation, because obviously it doesn't feel good when things don't go as planned. But when you're always staying close to what you want, why you want it, and how it will feel, then you're going to be more motivated to keep opening up little by little, keep taking little risks, because vulnerability is a risk, of course. So feel free, whatever we are talking about, whichever step, feel free to ask your questions and feel free to comment on your own experiences to do with rejection or focusing on outcomes and all the things that we talk about. So Mona says, sometimes I get information overload of signals from the other person. I need too much time to process this and react or open up to myself what to do. Yes, I understand completely what you mean. And one of the things that I was going to touch on later has to do with patience with yourself and being able to actually tell people that, I need time. I need time to process this. And I know you can't do this in every conversation, but if you're say you're having a heated discussion, a serious conversation, an emotional conversation, you can say, I need a moment to process this. And then the other thing is, so say I sense something is up and I don't see it as a chance. Yeah, so maybe it's to do with sort of like overanalyzing, or I hate to say overanalyzing, but really getting caught up in the other person's reactions. And being focused on action, again, will help you with this. Because when you're focused on outcomes, you're focused on how the other person is receiving everything you say. But if you know that you are living your values, and your value is you want to open up more, you want to use feeling messages more, you want to share more about who you are, then yes, you're paying attention to feedback, but you're not so wrapped up in it, because your confidence and your actions aren't dependent on how they're going to be received. Marco, do you have anything to add to what Mona said?
Yeah, I do. It's pretty much when it comes to processing this reaction that you mentioned, Michaela, it's overthinking also enters the account here, because for us INFJs, we will also overthink. Did I say the right stuff? Did I say the right sentence? Did I act the way that was supposed to? Following some social convention, but always, Mona, give yourself time as much as you need to process. Just like Michaela said, you're not focused just on the outcome. You're focused on your own action, your own confidence. Because when you do that, you will release yourself from that internal expectation that, hey, I need to do this, I need to say this properly, quote unquote. There is no such thing. So I know that overthinking plays a vital role here, because we will overthink our sentences and our actions. But just like Michaela said, when you're focused on yourself first in this case, and no, you're not being selfish or arrogant, you're just focusing on something that is meaningful to you and the person you're speaking to. So yeah, give yourself that time. You definitely earn it, and that person will understand it. So yeah.
Yes, and I just realized I answered Mona's question and part of Amy's question because I accidentally, Marco's like, oh, I know. Um, but yes, so both questions are pretty much answered, but to answer Amy's question a bit more in depth, because she asked, my social anxiety makes me second guess when I pick up on signs. So you're talking to somebody, you pick up on their signs, and then you're like instantly wrapped up in the signals they're giving you. So again, just to tie it all together, aside from having a daily practice of asking yourself what you want, why you want it, and how it will feel, tie it into your core values. So what are your values? And then when you're interacting with people, stick to living your values and know that when someone reacts a certain way, it's not your job to understand why or to really focus on why they react that way. And again, going back to dating, one thing that I used to do and that a lot of women in my program do is analyze everything a man does. So if he doesn't call, why didn't he call? If he kind of starts leaning back, why is he leaning back? What's the reason? And the thing that really, really helped me so much several years ago and has helped my students is it doesn't matter why. It doesn't matter why someone disappears or why someone rejects you. It's not your job to figure out why. Your job is to focus on you and your emotions and did that feel good to me anyways? Like, did I enjoy the interaction? What do I think? How do I feel? Did I do something that was out of alignment with my values, with my morals? No, I didn't. So it's fine. It doesn't matter. I can let that go. So that's what I mean by just not focusing so much on the outcomes and not analyzing it up the wazoo. Okay, so what Cynthia asks, what do you do when you feel like a person's sending mixed messages? They're off and on with you. Mm-hmm. Yes, and this does happen, and I'm sure as introverts and INFJs, you've often been the ones sending mixed signals as well. I know I certainly send mixed signals to people, and it's very confusing to people. And I think the answer really is the same, is really try to detach yourself from this idea that you need to figure out why they're doing this and know that it probably has nothing to do with you. It probably is something that they, like probably 80% of the time, mixed signals have to do with the other person. Has to do with a pattern of their behavior, or they're normally a person who's moody. Maybe they're another introvert and they need space a lot. Maybe they just don't want a relationship and they're kind of that way with everybody. Or maybe they don't want to be friends, but sometimes when that happens with me, I will just, if I want to be friends with that person, or if I'm interested in a relationship with that person, I will put out my open welcome sign and I'll let them come to me if they want to come to me. So instead of like really pushing, if someone's giving you mixed signals, just, let them kind of know like, hey, I'd like to be friends. I'd like to hang out sometime. Or when they do reach out to you, be responsive, be welcoming, but don't push. So that applies to dating or friendships. Anything to add to that, Marco?
Yeah, I only have one word that came to my mind is in connection with what you just said. We seek, like you said, we seek closure as INFJs, especially when a person left for no obvious reason. but we will continue to seek closure. In many instances, you don't need that closure because there is nothing you did wrong. Like Michaela said, 80% of the cases, it's nothing to do with you. Maybe that person had a difficult past. Maybe they had a difficult moment. Maybe simply the moment was wrong. Maybe it's just that, but it doesn't have to do with something that you did, said, or maybe that you wanted to, or maybe your behavior. No, people, it's not you. So many confuse this with, I did something wrong. No, you didn't. People have their own past, their own lives, and we just need to sometimes painfully accept that, even though it's not easy.
Yeah, definitely. So step number 3 is what is it, Marco? I'll let you start off that one.
Be authentic. This is a good one for us INFJs because authenticity is closely related to intimacy, because in today's modern world, so many people are forcing intimacy as a way of creating a close bond. But like I said, forcing, not creating a close bond. So this is something that you cannot force. And I'm going to give you a good example. INFJ's first date. Every single date I ever had, first date, I always felt I need to establish a good bond right from the start. I need to establish a good connection. I need to be more close to this person right from the start. No, you don't. That's not necessary. Eliminate the expectation right from the start. You don't have to go into marriage with this person after first date. You just need to have a good time. I just mentioned first date as an example. There are so many others. And saying no when you're trying to be authentic is also a form of, well, authenticity, of intimacy, because you're establishing a boundary to create that authentic connection with someone. Because if you don't have any boundary, then you won't know when to stop. That person won't know when they can stop. Maybe they will break a boundary and they will push you away, or vice versa as well. So saying no also can be a form of intimacy, because for us NFJs, it's not all about physical intimacy. It's more about the mind first, because we will firstly analyze the person's behavior, how they speak, how they act, and how they behave in our presence as well. So there are no playing mind games with INFJs, because we are simply focused on decisions and actions afterwards on the results. So this is really the key, because authenticity is created through the knowledge that we are rare, but using it only as a means of relaxation before a certain meeting. What I'm trying to tell you is get rid of the outcome that you have to establish an intimacy right from the start. This is an expectation that most INFJs will, I think, relate with, because we want to leave a good impression on that person. We want to be right from the very start, which is something that creates overthinking, creates anxiety, and further distances ourselves from ourselves first, because we need to have a good intimacy with ourselves first in order to establish it with someone else.
Mm-hmm. And so as far as being authentic goes, I know it's one of those things that can be tough to know how, like the actual how of being yourself when you feel like you're really different and when you've been rejected a lot for who you are. And so the first step to being yourself is to stop apologizing for who you are, stop apologizing for your opinions, for your needs, for your preferences, and start stating who you are as a fact. So who you are is simply a fact. So that means that it's neither bad nor is it braggy. So stating who you are doesn't mean that you're showing off. It doesn't mean that it's anything to be self-conscious about. It's just a fact. And, you know, this is something that I've really seen the fruit of this particular advice so much in my life. For example, being here in Puerto Vallarta, this is a scenario where I'm meeting a lot of new people. And it's bringing back a lot of memories of when, you know, for those of you who know me, you know that 5 years ago, I sold everything that wouldn't fit in a suitcase. I quit my job and I went off to find my purpose. And I left the country for a year. And I spent most of that time in Latin America. And to be honest, the people that I engaged with, that I was kind of acquaintances with throughout my hero's journey where I was in Latin America, oftentimes I felt like they were very abrasive personalities. Like they were the opposite of me. And it was good in a sense at that time because it really got under my skin and aggravated me, and it really fed my writing, and it helped me to establish Introvert Spring. But now there's really no need. And this is something I sent in an email to subscribers not too long ago. And that's this idea that, you don't have to spend time with people who you don't feel good around. Why? Why make time for people that you don't enjoy being with? And so to tie that back with being authentic, since I'm still always trying to get used to this one, but since I've stopped apologizing and given myself permission to no longer waste time with people who aggravate me, it's just incredible how easily I can attract people who I actually really get along with. And right away, they know that I'm an introvert. And it's no longer something that I feel awkward telling people like, oh, I'm an introvert. Are they going to judge me? No, it's just a fact. I'm an introvert. And I just share who I am from the beginning. And it's kind of magical how I meet people who have the same values as me, who I have so much in common with. And that's what happens when you state who you are without apology. And another thing to do with that is getting your connection fears out in the open quite quickly where they can't hurt you. And so when I say connection fears, I mean, maybe you have a fear that people are going to reject you because you spend a lot of time alone. Or maybe you have this fear because you think people won't be patient enough to give you time to open up. Or maybe you're afraid that your quietness is going to be confusing, annoying, or unattractive to people. So these are your connection fears, the reasons you think you're not worthy of having these meaningful friendships and deep friendships. And so when you actually know that those are your secret fears and you get them out in the open quite quickly, it's amazing how this can actually deepen connections and the fear doesn't come to pass. For example, I might say casually now, like, oh, sometimes it can be tough for me traveling alone because I'm an introvert and I go through these phases where I spend a lot of time with people and then I just really need to be alone. And sometimes this confuses people, it confuses me. So I might say this casually in a first-time conversation. And I have actually like a couple weeks ago. And that really, it helped so much because for when I was being a little bit vulnerable, I was sharing about who I was without apologizing. And it also helped these people to understand that I'm not rejecting them if I choose to be alone. And, it really paved the way for a more authentic interaction, a more authentic friendship. So yes, I hope that makes sense to you guys. Please let us know your thoughts on being yourself, on sharing more about who you are, and what are some of the challenges that you face, and we'll try to address that. Okay, let's see. I see lots of comments. Did you notice any, Marco, that you wanted to read?
Yeah. I noticed that a lot of people, and this is a pattern I noticed. A lot of people say that they have a quiet voice still. Yeah, this is something that several people wrote. I just wanted to add that just because you have a quiet voice doesn't mean that you're not heard, both literally and figuratively. Like Michaela said, you don't need other people's permission, not just to speak, but also to be who you really are. Really, you don't need their permission. You are who you are, period. So there is no higher ground here. There is no, just like Michaela said, you are who you are, and people will have to accept that, even if you have a quiet voice. And Peter asked, how do you get people to listen if you're very, very quiet? We mentioned this at one point. Of course, confidence will give you a starting advantage, but it doesn't necessarily mean that people will listen. It's all about how you present yourself when entering the room. I used to present myself to others, and I said, okay, hi, here I am. Now, when I enter the room, because I know who I am, I don't present myself to others. I mean, I do, I introduce myself, but not in a way, not in a skittish way that I'm afraid. No, I'm confidently telling them, okay, like Michaela said, I'm an introvert. I'm an INFJ. Maybe they don't know about it. I will kindly explain if they want to hear, but if not, I'm okay with that because I will be at peace with who I am. Even not completely, of course, but to a certain point, surely. But you don't need to force people to listen. They will listen to you. The ones who really want to, they will listen, regardless of quiet voice or a loud voice.
Mm-hmm. And so one thing that's important to remember about getting people to notice you, pay attention, listen to you, is oftentimes it's not about what you say, it's not about how loud you are, it's about your presence. And I think of a lot of introverts that I have known who exemplify this. Like I knew this introvert who was, this big burly guy, and he just had this really strong presence about him. Like you could tell he wouldn't take crap from anybody. You could tell he had a story. He had his own kind of vulnerability and confidence that made people, when he did speak, he rarely spoke, and he spoke very slowly too. But when he spoke, everyone would kind of like lean in and listen. And it's because of his presence. And the presence comes from not apologizing for yourself, from building your own self-acceptance. And sometimes your outward manifestation can take a little time to catch up. So what I mean is maybe you do feel better about yourself than you did in the past. Maybe you have accepted that you're an INFJ, but your body language and your habits in interactions haven't yet caught up. So you're still kind of used to taking up the least amount of space, to letting everyone speak over you and that sort of thing. And so now it's a matter of just making tiny tweaks little by little. And that tweak might be changing your body language. It might be trying out different voice tones. So it's not about being louder necessarily, but I've said this before, it's about the vocal resonance. So I feel like a lot of people, and a lot of women in particular, will not speak with optimum resonance. They'll choose to speak this way because they thought that was more attractive growing up. And that actually is straining on your voice. And so play around and see what feels good. So yes, start with the inside, the mindset stuff, and then work your way towards the outer body language, voice tone, and that sort of thing. It's all about presence. Okay, let's see. So we're on to step number 4, and that is to look for key connection points. So what I mean by connection points is where you and that other person have something in common. And the funny thing about connection points is often in our desire to connect, we instead start judging. And we think, I can't connect with this person because they're so different than me, because they're a smoker, or because they grew up a different way. They have different preferences. They're messy and I'm not. So you find all these disconnects when really what you want to be looking for is a few key common connection points. And the most powerful connection points, I'll tell you right now, are common struggles and common values. So values determine friendships and romantic partnerships more than preferences. Values over preferences. So a core value would be, that you need to live with integrity. You want to make a difference in the world. You believe in, you're like kind of a new age spiritual person, and you believe in the law of attraction. You believe what goes around comes around. So your core driving values in life that you care about. And preferences are just, well, I don't like peanuts, or even for some people, I'll give you an example where there's some overlap. For some people, not eating meat is a value, that they're like, they only want to date people who are vegetarians. For some people, it's a bit more on the preference side where, oh, I don't eat meat, but it doesn't matter that you eat meat because we share, there's other connection points that matter more. So keep that in mind when you're tempted to judge and put up a wall, because oftentimes you can find those common connection points. Marco, and what else do you think matters when it comes to connection points?
Yeah, I'll just add two small ones, quote unquote. One is that starting click that we as INFJs tend to establish with a person when we start talking to them. It's just, you cannot plan this, you cannot control it. It's just something that collides, just like connection points that Michaela mentioned just now. It's being rare is an advantage here because you will immediately get that starting click, like I love calling it, with that person. It doesn't matter the topic, it doesn't matter the behavior, because when you get that click, you will agree on almost everything, but you will maintain that key connection points, whether this is being vulnerable, believing in something that is maybe different, or maybe having the same value or not. But being rare, being the rarest personality type here is an advantage, I believe it, and a huge advantage for INFJs when searching for those key connection points.
Mm-hmm. So you feel like as an INFJ, you either have like an instant connection with people and you know right away.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you ever feel like sometimes those connections grow unexpectedly over time, or like there's someone you didn't think you were going to connect with and maybe over time you do connect with them?
Absolutely. This is where our intuition goes into the picture, because if there isn't the starting connection, if there isn't that click that I mentioned, then patience and intuition had to go. And if you really want to get close to that person, if you really want to establish a connection, you're going to have to be patient, especially with INFJs, because with us, it's all about patience. We're not going to open up to you immediately. We're not going to share our deepest, darkest secrets with you on our first date or our first meeting. That's not going to happen. So if it doesn't happen that you establish a good understanding right from the start, it doesn't mean it's all over. It only means that A, more effort is needed, B, there isn't any chemistry between you, whether it's a friendship or a potential relationship, or C, further reach out is needed later on. But like I said, it's all coming through a patience kind of lens, I think.
Yes, and we're going to talk more about that in the next point. But one thing that comes to mind is it all ties in with the values. Sometimes I meet people and I don't think we're going to be friends. I don't think we're going to be good friends. And however, they're good people. I can sense that they're good people and they're kind. I've realized over the years, this is a core value. I cannot be friends with someone who is not kind. And there's a difference between being nice and being kind, like somebody who actually, they have that little bit of compassion. And I find if you've been an outsider in your life, chances are you're kind, because people who've never experienced true rejection often aren't so kind. They haven't developed that kind of compassion, that kind of sensitivity. So sometimes I'll meet people and they're kind, but I'm like, oh, we don't have much in common. But then something magical happens and all the layers are peeled back after a certain amount of time. And I realize actually we have more in common than I thought. We share core values and we develop this really deep connection that I wouldn't have imagined from the beginning. And the same goes for dating, is people are always looking for that instant love at first sight. And often it doesn't happen that way. You'll know if you definitely don't like somebody, but sometimes it can sneak up on you. So that brings us to the next point, which is number 5. Step number 5 to open up and connect deeply, sorry for the background noise, is use the power of proximity and patience. And this is something I talk about in my book, The Irresistible Introvert. And that is that proximity, and that is just being close to someone for a certain amount of time. So people you work with, people you pass a lot in the hallway even, people you see on a regular basis, that determines whether you're going to be close to someone more than almost any other factor. And if you think of it, if you think of the friends you made in school and at work and college, it's often that proximity factor more than anything else. And in this book called The Like Switch, which is written by a former FBI agent, he talks about this power of proximity and how oftentimes if they were trying to get close to someone who was a spy, they would use this proximity factor to get close to this spy and get them to trust this other agent. So if they knew that this spy was going to be at a grocery store every day, a certain grocery store, then this other agent would go to that grocery store at the same time and not interact, not do anything, just gradually build up. So for weeks, he would just go at the same time and just pass by and look around. And then maybe after a couple of weeks, he made eye contact. And then after a while, he said hello. And that was it. And that actually built up a sense of trust. And they were able to, this spy knew that this guy was an agent, but eventually when they did connect, he was more willing to open up because of that proximity factor. So it's really, really interesting. And for people who are tend to be more closed off, like INFJs, like people who are introverted, proximity works in our favor if we allow it to. If we just relax and tell ourselves, hey, you know what? I don't have to open up right away. If we can just, stick it out and be in the same place, and I just open up little by little, then that's going to make a difference. And that's where the patience comes up as well. Patience with yourself and patience with other people. So for me, this is something that I'm working on sharing more quickly, is just saying something like, yeah, it takes me a while to open up to people, that sort of thing. Right now, I'm not in a relationship, but I do intend to, next time I'm in a relationship, to say right away, I like to take things slow, and it takes me a while to open up, and I just want that to be okay. So a lot of times it is about what do you want, and you can dictate, you can tell people what you need. And so the other thing to do with proximity is look at the people who are already in your life, because they're the most likely people that you're going to deepen connections with. You don't always have to start from scratch. Marco, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I have a quote I completely forgot, and it's from the late Jim Rohn, which is a famous one of the best motivational speakers I ever heard of. And he says, and I hate to use the word average, but this is in a good way. He says, in connection with what you just mentioned, Michaela, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So it's not about rushing things with friendships, with relationships. It's about patience and giving yourself the permission to accept that patience. I'm not the opening up type, and at the very beginning, I need time I need to give myself time, not just to open up, but to be more vulnerable. So that's perfectly fine. And I saw the word accident in one of the comments. So there are no accidental connections. There are no accidental encounters. So take this into account when you meet someone, because everyone you meet has a purpose, whether this is just a passerby or just like Michaela's agent, the FBI agent, just saying hello or not. Everybody will teach you something, whether this is a simple hello or something far more deeper. So yeah, but that's another story.
Yes. All right. So we have a few minutes to answer any questions that you might have related to this topic. So please do start typing your questions in the chat box, and then you can mark them as questions by hitting that little circle. Okay. Were there any other questions that we haven't addressed yet? I think someone asked, how do you know when to take a risk? Or let me just look at the questions.
Again, while Michaela searches for a question, please mark your questions with the Q sign so we can have an easier time finding them.
When is it best to take risks? I'm only available during university classes and live at home. Do you have an answer to that, Marco?
Yes, I have an answer. I mean, it's a straightforward answer, but there is no such thing as the right time to take a risk, in my opinion. However, there is such thing as choosing that time. So time is always right. If you wait for the right time, you will wait forever, because there is no such thing as a perfect moment. But you can choose that moment for yourself and for that person in order to share something with them. So do not focus on the right time. Focus on, do you really want to do that? That's the big question, not choosing the right time, because the time is always right. If you wait, you'll never see it.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, that it was kind of an open question. So I'm assuming you mean the right time to take a risk, opening up to a new friend or something like that. For me personally, when I'm not sure about trying something different or taking a certain action, I like to just follow the clues. So first I'll get in touch, reconnect with my intuition. I reconnect with my intuition by doing morning pages. So just 3 pages, stream of consciousness, first thing in the morning, dream journaling, going for long walks. This is how I reconnect with my intuition. So I do that. And then I just look up and I pay attention to the clues. Like, I know this sounds hippy-dippy, but what is the universe trying to tell me now? Is there something, or even the other person, look for clues in their actions, see what comes to you. And that's my philosophy. Yes. Okay, so Peter asks, how do you get from superficial chit chat to talking about core values? So great question. Of course, that's not going to be your opening sentence. Like, these are my core values. So first things first, when it comes to getting out of that whole like humdrum small talk situation, the mindset of taking a different route. So as adults, we tend to love our routines. We take the same roads, the same paths, and they lead to the same places. It's the same with conversation. And this is the problem with small talk. Everybody's taking the same route. They're asking the same questions. They're giving the same answers. However, you can choose a different path. You can choose a different question. You can branch out a little bit without making the other person feel uncomfortable, without getting too deep too fast. You're simply choosing a different route. So this is something that I apply a lot. And a lot of times it's just because I realize I'm really bored with this conversation. How can I shake it up? How can I make it more interesting? And so I'll just ask a question to do with something I'm interested in. And for me, I'm often interested in people's emotions and their relationships. So I might say something like, oh, so how do you find it traveling alone? How does it feel to you? Because it's something that I feel is difficult, something I want to talk about. So that's a question I might ask. Or I might ask about someone's relationship. Now, obviously, this is one where you're not going to like dive super deep really quickly, but I might just ask, so do you have boyfriends? Or if they seem receptive, I might say, have you ever been in love? Just getting a little more playful and thinking outside the box of different routes you can take that don't have to be so deep and so emotional. And as far as tying in your values, oftentimes it's easy to, I know it's surprising, but it can be pretty easy to tie it into casual conversation. Like I said, I've been meeting new people while traveling, and traveling is often the topic of conversation. Where have you been? Da, 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 da. Oh, well, you know, I've been here and here, but I try to stay in one place a lot because I'm an introvert and I get overwhelmed easily. And what have you done? Well, I've done a couple of things, but I tend to go through these social cycles where I need a lot of time alone. So, you know, I don't do as much as a lot of other travelers. And so when you're in that mindset of it's perfectly okay to share these things, then you can often just pepper regular conversation with those revelations. Okay, so how do you know if it's a safe person to open up to? So that's a good question. And the good news is that you don't have to, in fact, it's better not to open up and be so vulnerable all at once. You know, because you're paying attention to their rejections, you're listening to what their core values are, and you're listening to your intuition about them. And that's how you'll know if it's the time to open up a bit more and a bit more and a bit more. Any thoughts on that, Marco?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, to get rid of any social norms and conventions when it comes to opening up to a person who you think it's safe, because people tend to have an expectation that everyone is not trustworthy. So this is the expectation that can determine that can really much push a possible good connections for the future. So get rid of expectations for the beginning and just allow yourself, like Michaela said, you don't have to share about the meaning of life right from the start, but what you can do is just go around the small talk. Don't ask the same old questions that people ask. You can expand the topic, listen to what the person said, and if they repeat a word a couple of times, then it usually means that's important to them. So listen to those small hidden signs, and just use them in your conversation.
Mm-hmm. And Megan says, when I reflect back on unsafe people from the past, I realize I always knew, just don't always admit it to myself. And that's a great way of putting it, because you have pretty good intuition. You probably always know. And I mean, there are signs you can look up, looking up signs of toxic people. And we've talked about that in the past. And usually toxic people have a certain way of communicating that you can tell right away. And oftentimes they'll be pathological liars. They'll kind of tell you stories that put themselves in a certain light. And if you have intuition, you'll be able to tell, like, oh, this person's kind of being manipulative. Like, they're telling me this to make themselves look like the hero or to make themselves look like the victim. And you'll start to notice and recognize these patterns. And so it's just a matter of following your intuition and, yeah, just listening to your intuition. Wonderful. So those were all excellent questions. And it was so great to connect with you all during today's INF Jam. We would love to hear your suggestions for the next jams. So feel free to let us know by replying to any of these INF Jam reminder emails that you got. Yeah, because we love to cover the most relevant topics for you guys. So thank you, Marco, as well, for sharing your wisdom.
You're most welcome, Michaela. Thank you for sharing yours, and thanks everybody. You were wonderful yet again.
All right, everyone, take care. We'll see you at the next jam.
Bye, everyone.